Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. Here you can grow your knowledge about marketing operations, listen to ideas and strategies to help you scale, grow, and optimize your efficiency, drive your speed to market, and enrich your work life. Let's get to it.
Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. I'm Glenn Bottomley, and today my guest is Xander Broeffle, Director of Marketing Operations at CS2, an organization which provides a revenue growth architecture for growth stage B2B tech companies that powers efficient and predictable revenue growth. Thanks for joining us today, Xander.
Glenn, thanks so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, I am so happy that you are here because I know you are extremely passionate about this link between marketing and sales, and specifically how marketing operations can be that link that ties these two functional areas together to create real results. So at a high level, can you give a rundown of your experience as to why you believe that link is just so crucial?
Absolutely. Happy to do so. So one of the major problems that I see when I'm working with clients as a consultant or when I was working in-house is that you have marketing operating off of its goals. You have sales marketing operating off of its goals, and they don't always align. And when you have that misalignment, you get into these situations where executive leadership is asking, what's marketing bringing to the table versus sales bringing to the table? And you're defending what sourced your pipeline and what sourced your revenue, as opposed to flipping that and working as a collective revenue team, working on the larger goals of the business to ultimately bring in more pipeline that closes into more revenue. And so what I've found as a marketing ops leader and a revenue operations leader as well is you need to ensure that all of your people, process, data, and technology are aligned toward those two goals. And we see things that are in the weeds that other folks in the business may not be aware of, that we can tie those connections along the way so that we spend less time trying to defend our turf and more time winning deals together.
What has been some of the keys to your success about cascading that view down through a sales organization and down through a marketing organization or a revenue organization, depending on how an organization is structured?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing is when you are working with market. Glenn, can you ask me the question again?
Oh, sure. All right. So you've shared in the past, what I'm curious about is if you are cascading this information down, what my question is how do you ensure that the message of, hey, gang, we don't have competing views here. We have a coordinated, synchronized view. My question is, how do you cascade that down into an organization, whether it's a sales organization, a marketing organization, or a revenue organization?
Great question. The first place that starts for me is in quarterly business reviews. Something that will oftentimes happen, and I'm sure that we've all experienced this, is you get out of your marketing QBR and you get out of your sales QBRs and you've told conflicting information. And then the very first thing, the very next action item that you get is, okay, who's right? So the first thing that I recommend starting with is essentially building a coalition amongst the operations teams. That before you are presenting any data to your leadership teams, you're getting together as an operations org, whether that's sales operations, marketing operations, analytics, get all teams involved. Align on the data before you start to bring it into your respective teams. If you don't have like an organized RevOps organization that is doing this through org structure, make sure that you at least have this unofficial coalition amongst the like-minded people, right? And now what ends up happening is that you go into a QBR, you're sharing information on wins and successes of your respective teams and the teams across the lane, right? If you're doing a marketing QBR, maybe what you're doing is you're telling, how did marketing impact the pipeline, as opposed to, this is what marketing sourced for the pipeline. Because at the end of the day, no deal should be able to get through without any marketing impact whatsoever. And if it does, we have a disconnect. On the flip side, you can't close a deal without sales. So you elevate each other in those QBRs, which then leaves the executive leadership team much more aligned on, this is how we're doing as a collective organization, as opposed to debating orgs.
Yeah, because in a sense, you're really making sure that the marketing team, the sales team, is coordinated, collaborating together, and focused on the ultimate goal, which is we're generating revenue.
Yes.
Yeah. And I know that in the past when we chatted, one of the things that I thought was interesting, or kind of a way that you sort of described that, was that marketing and marketers should really focus less on attribution and more on overall program success. So in other words, first touch, last touch, all of these, this sourced here, this came inbound, this contributed, et cetera. That's all important. But your view is, what is raise the level of abstraction? What is the overall program of success? Can you dig into that a little bit further?
Yeah, happy to. Because I don't want it to seem like attribution isn't important. It's very important. But kind of going back to the prove it versus improve the data. I work with somebody on our team who tries to bring that home every time that we're talking with clients, is attribution data. Yes, we need to prove out ROI and ensure that the business understands what value each collective team is bringing. Otherwise, we're not going to get investment. And so as a result, what we recommend is looking at the data and finding what's really working. Maybe it's very clear that you have some campaigns that are bringing in new leads, but they're not ultimately driving to opportunity pipeline. But maybe you have something that has less volume but higher conversion into driving opportunities, and you can start to tell those stories. Or you can tell the story of, here's the campaigns that we've been running that have helped to accelerate the pipeline. Here's a comparison of the 5 opportunities that weren't involved and the 15 that were, and the 15 that were closed in X amount of time faster, right? You're telling a stronger story of how marketing is overall influencing, versus I'm going to call it a traditional model of, we had 500 MQLs and that drove 15 opportunities. And as a result, marketing brought this much total value into the business, completely excluding the sales motion, the SDRs, all of the outbounding that probably took place in that larger organization.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, you're evaluating the success of the team, looking at revenue, and attributing that to the team and the team's efforts. Because to your point, did this come in from an SEM campaign, or who knows? Maybe it was a blog post, maybe it was an inbound, maybe it was a trade show. Whatever that was, it's by looking at, to your point, the overall program success. Each individual, responsibility that you have along the way is important to understand, but don't lose, sort of like mistake the forest from the trees, so to speak. Is if you focus too much on the trees, are we really, generating revenue, the forest, so to speak?
Absolutely. And one of the ways that can show up really poorly is that marketing is maybe only holding themselves to an MQL goal. Right. We talk about that often. And I don't think that having an MQL goal is a bad thing. I mean, it's a leading indicator of pipeline, right? And it's a key point in the process that we need to be able to measure in order to ensure that we have the right conversion of those leads that we're bringing into pipeline. So I disagree with any statement of saying, let's do away with an MQL.
Mhm.
However, if you're only focused on that type of a metric and you're losing sight of, well, did those MQLs actually drive us into any new business? You might be walking into the room saying marketing's hitting all of its goals. Let's, be happy with that. When in fact, the sales organization and the business as a whole is going to miss their revenue goal this month or this quarter and next quarter.
Yeah, yeah, because everything is, to your point, leads that ultimately to revenue. So how many leads are you getting? How many MQLs are you getting? How many sales quality leads are you getting? How many of those are early stage? How many of those are late stage? And then ultimately, what's your closed won and closed lost?
Yes.
And so in my experience, that focus on closed won, and then all of the other measurements along the way, count of leads, source of those leads, all important, really, really good. How can you keep that flow coming through? MQL, really important, right? Early indicator to the SQL. But ultimately, for me, SQL is such a critical, metric, because if sales, has evaluated this opportunity, it fits the business, we can make money at it, it hits the sweet spot. That to me is a really important metric. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it doesn't convert to a closed won. And so understanding that closed won and then looping back, okay, great. What did we just learn from that closed won opportunity or closed loss through win-loss analysis? And then
Yep.
how do you then bring that back in and modify, your lead acquisition process? Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's that's exactly the point, is utilizing that data to learn and improve, and ultimately what we all need to do right now, which is do more with less.
Yeah, yeah. And then what's been your experience about how you should, again, we talked a little bit earlier about cascading information and that sort of belief down into a marketing and sales team. But various organizations have other dependencies. Some organizations have heavy dependency on manufacturing teams, others have very heavy dependency on finance teams. So, how do you feel that we should lead a marketing organization when that marketing organization works together with other departments, and there's criticalities and other dependencies on other departments?
I mean, I'm gonna have to mark us again here.
No
Sorry.
problem. No problem. I think the key for me, we can mark that with Gabrielle here, but I think the key is, what I'm curious about, Xander, is, you know, a marketing and sales connection, so critical.
Hmm.
But certain B2B organizations and certainly B2C, you know, a marketing team has to integrate to a finance team, an operations team, a sales ops team. There's so many of these other teams. So I'm curious about your view about how should then a marketing operations team build those links and continue to build those types of relationships across the board, as
Sure.
opposed to, because that helps to drive revenue too. Because, for example, if you bring in all this revenue, yes, the sales team works, et cetera, but it doesn't meet the capacity planning that you have in the manufacturing facility. That's not good. If you can't make money at it, you can sell it at a certain price, but you're not going to be profitable at that price.
Sure.
Then you're not doing the right thing. So I'm curious about your view about how can a marketing team ensure that awareness across the organization and building those links and collaborations across the organization.
Yep. Yep. I think for me, the biggest thing is, first of all, speaking the language of those other stakeholders, right? Oftentimes, especially when we start to think about finance and marketing, sometimes we start to speak way different languages. So the more that we can help them understand what we are seeing in the market, what we are seeing, because ultimately, when they are building out their revenue plans for the year, we're walking that backwards, and we're saying, if we need to get X dollars of revenue, we know our conversion rates are going from revenue to SQL to MQL to lead, and we can break that down by the channel, and we can start to anticipate and predict how much revenue we're going to be bringing in Q3, Q4, Q1 of the next year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in my experience, marketing operations sits in this very interesting place where I feel like in the sales ops org, you're very focused on what's happening maybe this quarter and next quarter. and you're going, okay, marketing, what's coming down the next quarter? Right.
Hmm.
And that's where we sit, where we are looking at both forward facing as well as current state and trying to help the business predict more. So if we ramp up a bunch of marketing this quarter and we know that it's going to take 6 months to get that into a closed won opportunity, we can now bridge gaps with professional services, with the manufacturing team to help them predict what are we going to have from a capacity plan.
Yeah.
It's an imperfect science, of course, because we're anticipating, with so many different variables, but the more that we can give them the plan for the next step, the better off that we are. And
Yeah.
oftentimes I think that it's like we kind of get into this current state. What are we doing in the current quarter? What can marketing do? That's where velocity and like taking opportunity campaigns is really great. But if you focus your marketing team on solving a lead problem this current quarter, it's not solving a pipeline problem this quarter. It's going to be solving a pipeline problem for next quarter. And
Hmm.
so you're always kind of thinking ahead.
Yeah. And this partnership, to your point, you think about the sales funnel and, marketing at the front end, trying to help to drive sales, bringing that into a close. But that pipeline is equally as important based on product or mix or whatever your product mix is. That information is just as useful to manufacturing facilities. Are they tooling up? Is there excess capacity? Where are we, which plants are we putting this, production of this customer opportunity into? And that also then, sets up, okay, well, how much of that revenue is going to come in this fiscal year? That starts to inform your financial, activities, et cetera. So, the funnel information really is an important component organizationally wide, as opposed to just, starting with a lead and ending with a closed one. And now we just rinse and repeat and we do it again. It's like, if we can look at the sales funnel from a full operational funnel value chain through an organization, that becomes a really compelling aspect and contribution of the marketing operations team to an organization.
Absolutely. It's a great
Mhm.
opportunity for you to get that face time with teams that you may not traditionally work with. And it's just really important to, reach out and build relationships. What are the problems that some of these teams are facing? Maybe you're talking to your production line and they are telling you that they have capacity planning problems, or maybe they're saying, hey, we have too much capacity, or, X, Y, and Z, and you may be able to find ways to help them solve those non-marketing problems very easily.
Hmm. Yeah, and the interesting thing, I'd be interested in your thought on this is, when you think about in cloud-based business, B2B, MarTech and technology, where there may not necessarily be a manufacturing link, um, you know, what's your view of the downstream? So in other words, I have my funnel,
Mhm.
and I've got a closed one. And I think there was something that you said earlier, which I thought was really profound, which is, now what other things, particularly if there isn't a downstream manufacturing connection, but you mentioned, then there's professional services, there's cross sell, upsell, there's other platforms, there's other integrations, maybe there's other development, custom code, et cetera. Is that sort of some of the other ways to look at it from a tech, if you're in a technology business?
Yeah, and that's been primarily my experience, is in B2B tech. I've worked manufacturing and I've worked a couple others, but where I've spent my bread and butter has been SaaS business, right? And it's
Hmm.
it's a it's a cyclical business. You're not just selling the widget and then moving on. You are selling a product that you are expecting a renewal. So you have marketing operations who's assisting with onboarding, with implementation, with adoption, all of those programs we're going to be involved in, whether it's from, you know, communication. And so that's emails or landing pages or programs that way. Or more importantly, who else in the organization is engaging with us?
Hmm.
Oftentimes customer teams, customer marketing teams, CSMs, they don't necessarily see marketing as playing a role, right? I'm the manager, I'm managing my relationship. But what we can help to expose is who are the additional buyers within an organization. Maybe you have a tool that is actually very well suited with that one department and one team, but you can expand that out now to multiple teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
Worked with plenty of development groups that are like, yeah, this dev team within the organization has bought us, but then we also have it with 15 other teams. And so you
Yeah.
don't want to lose sight of the funnel and the visibility that we give, because you can either take it into a kind of customer life cycle of adoption, evangelism, all of that, or in my opinion, even more importantly, new buyers within the existing account.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Um, Let me switch gears a little bit. So obviously you as a marketing operations leader, you have aspirational goals.
Mhm.
My question is, how do you ensure that your goals and the goals that you establish for your team are aligned with the other functional teams in your organization? And in addition to alignment, how do you also ensure that they're not conflicting? You talked a little bit about that, about marketing and sales as an example, but can you talk a little bit about how do you ensure alignment, and then how do you ensure they're not conflicting?
Great question. So first of all, you have to ask yourself, and for anybody who's listening, I have a sign behind me that says it depends. And it depends is an answer a lot on the marketing ops side, right? And I say it often, so it depends. It depends. Do you already have a process in place? So let's go with that, right? Organization is structured well. We have a leadership team that's building out goals, large rocks for us to address within a quarter, within a half year, or a year. Let's make sure that the work that we are doing is impacting those big rocks, right? So when we build out our roadmap, we need to ensure that the priorities that we're building as a marketing ops organization are first going to align with that. If we take it one step down and we say within our marketing organization, if we are not aligned to a big rock methodology or an OKR methodology or something like that, it's a great opportunity for you to partner with your CMO or your leader of marketing to say, how do we align our marketing team? Like, I want to start at the basics. Are we aligned to the business? Are we aligned to the department? The answer is the department doesn't have anything and everybody's operating off of their own goals. Well, we know we're going to be misaligned with the sales ops team because we're misaligned with the marketing team. So let's get
Yeah.
that under control, right? Great opportunity to step up as a leader in marketing operations and introduce some of those concepts if you don't have those concepts in place yet.
Mhm.
After you've solved it within your own domain, and while you're solving it within your own domain, let's be honest, now you're also branching out to talking with the head of sales. What are your priorities? Talking with the head of customer success. What are your priorities? The head of SDRs. What are your priorities? If you start to see misalignment, now it's time to pull a yellow flag and get all of leadership aligned, right?
Yeah.
I think that marketing ops and the thing that I love about marketing ops and the thing that is also very painful is oftentimes we have a lot of responsibility without a lot of authority. And so if you're identifying gaps in the business, that is probably a quote unquote leadership problem. Pull together the leaders,
Mhm.
step up, get those teams together to help try and align them. I've done things from organizing pipeline reviews to hosting workshops to solve problems as a collective team. So if there's nobody in the business right now that's doing that because everybody's kind of got their own goals, take the opportunity to bring people together.
Yeah. Yeah, because goals can be isolating. Goals can be something that, if a team is so focused on that goal, they're just going to be going, 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 going. And, but the partnership that they have with another department, either upstream or downstream, if the upstream or downstream doesn't know what those goals are, they can be very isolating in the sense that, hey, look, I'm not hitting this goal. I need more help. But everybody's like, I had no idea that was your goal. You're an SDR team that is focused on bringing in leads or qualifying an opportunity, and maybe it's a quantity, and then I don't know, maybe a marketing team that's supporting that is focused on the number of blog posts, or
Yeah.
something that's not, it's just completely disconnected. That's going to cause a problem, and
Mhm.
and so to your point, build the one key takeaway that I heard from your response there is communicate, understand what are those goals and understand how are we aligned. And if there is conflict, such as a simple example that I just gave, how do you resolve that and then align, those goals? So I think that's really, really fascinating, and really great input that you shared.
And I've found that to be, if somebody needs like a practical, like, how do I get that started? Best way to get that started is to try and set up regular one-on-ones with important leaders, right? That is going to be demand gen, customer success. That is going to be within marketing, some of your marketing leaders. That's going to be IT and web, because oftentimes you're partnering with those teams to accomplish your goals,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
Having conversations, understanding what their goals are, and then making sure that you have a clear roadmap of these are the things that I'm trying to get done. So that way, when you're having these conversations, you can find, oh, that goal that you have, I have no capacity for. I'm being asked from the executive team, blah, blah, blah. And then you can really start to make sure that you have a roadmap that's going to collectively work. Because the worst thing would be is you get in the middle of your quarter, you had all these goals and you can't accomplish them because the other team wasn't there to help.
Now
Or vice versa.
yeah, or vice versa, exactly. You've also talked a little bit about RevOps. So we've had a variety of guests on this podcast that talk about a variety of organizational structures: standalone marketing team, standalone sales team, revenue operations team, marketing operations teams, and everything in between. Now, you've had a lot of success with RevOps, so revenue operations teams, and everything that's sort of tied into that. So, can you describe, in your experience, how a RevOps team is structured? What's been your experience of a really good structure? And then, how have you found that has helped drive success in the organizations in which you've worked?
For sure. For sure. Because it's hard to do. I mean, like the first disclaimer, and I'm sure that other people have shared this information as well, is you can't just build a team and say, we have RevOps, we've checked the box. The box is exactly what we've just been talking about for the last period of time, is we need to communicate, we need to align, and we need to effectively work as a collective team. And if you just say, I have RevOps, but I'm going to continue to operate it off like it's marketing ops or like it's sales ops, it's not actually accomplishing the goal, right? So RevOps teams that work really well, I'm finding, and kind of through LinkedIn and other networks that I have, oftentimes it's sales operations leaders that take the role of head of RevOps, and they really haven't had any experience on the marketing ops side. And that's A-okay, as long as that person is curious and wants to learn about the marketing side, right? It only works if the head of your RevOps team is equally supporting the sales ops team that goes under them, the sales enablement team, the analysts team. Like, there has to be a consistent support structure in place. I've seen it not work where it just goes, I'm going to have marketing ops roll into me, but I'm not going to actually provide the support that they need in order to be successful, right?
Yeah.
So the goal here is each team should be representing the organization that they directly align with, right? If you have a revenue operations team that still has like a manager of marketing ops, that's primarily who they're supporting, and somebody who's primarily supporting on sales ops, and somebody who's primarily supporting customer success. Let's make sure that we understand where all of those priorities align. And then as a revenue operations team, you can build out a roadmap that is ensuring that all of those teams are supported, and that you have, the right structure in place to achieve it, as opposed to it just being like the stepchild that nobody wants to talk about. And sometimes that does happen.
Yeah. Well, and it's a very insightful comment about the importance of support. That support can come from, a perspective of investment. It could be, the organizational support, et cetera. And it's just really understanding, the various roles of the organization, whether it's someone on a digital team, a marketing team, what have you. So continuing to have that support and understanding, walking a mile in someone else's shoes, so to speak, I think is really key. This brings up a thought that we talk about a lot in the art of marketing operations, and that is the physical marketing impressions. So obviously, as you know, physical marketing impressions, they work together, obviously, with digital marketing impressions for brands everywhere, no matter what product. So can you share how you've seen this integration between the physical and the digital come to life in the companies that you've worked with?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I always go back to when thinking about this question is you have events, right? And I love when the company that I'm a part of really takes some small events that are really important, have all the right stakeholders in it, and they go all out, right? When you visit the booth, you're the booth that everybody knows about. You have that physical presence. They've seen you with the welcome bags. They've seen you at the airport. They've seen you while you're driving. They've seen you every which way, right? And when they get to the booth, they're like, I didn't know who you were, but all I can see
You're
is X
everywhere.
company. You're everywhere, right? You can't tie that back into an opportunity attribution tool, right? It just doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen.
You might get a quote and you could add it in your notes, but you're probably not going to show that off at the QBR.
The
Outside of,
QBR.
hey, look at how great it looked, but not
Let me share with the
necessarily
CEO.
the value, right?
Exactly.
But that matters, especially when you're trying to break in. And I think it matters just as much when you are the leader, because you don't want the next small startup to come in and take over your share just because they had a louder voice and a louder physical presence. So if you can identify, again, I work primarily B2B tech companies, so it's a lot of digital, and that's where a lot of the focus is. But if you can find what are those physical opportunities, maybe it's in a very targeted area where you're going to do, physical mailings or things like that, or maybe it's swag that you're bringing along to the meeting. Like, all of those touch points just keep the buyer thinking about you.
Yeah.
But when you start talking about marketing analytics, you're probably not going to see it. And that's where I love the name of the podcast here. That's where the art comes in, as well as the science.
Exactly. No, that's precisely it. And, I'm really glad that you've mentioned all that, because those are really good experiences and something that we often forget. But to your point, anytime that you yourself go to a very large trade show, just think about how you're experiencing the brands that are, exhibiting, their booths at a very large trade show. You see it at the airport, you see it on the, billboards, you see it advertising, geofenced digital advertisements. These are all examples of building that brand. So I think that's great.
Yeah.
So Xander, before we wrap up today's episode, what's the main takeaway that you want to share to help understand the challenges facing marketing operations executives today?
There was a photo that I constantly see on LinkedIn where it's the photo of the cheerleader holding the other cheerleader up, and then the cheerleader is like with the football guy, and they're celebrating, and it's always like some support team holding up the sales team, celebrating the win with the customer, or something like that. And I always go, it's a collective team that's making this happen. Marketing ops is not lifting up everybody else. Marketing's not lifting up everybody else. Sales isn't lifting up everybody else. If we weren't there in all of our collective teams, we can't win. So I just really want to bring home that, yes, we have to be able to show value that we're providing to the business, but spend more time trying to figure out what's working and what's not working, so that way we can improve and continue to grow, as opposed to fighting amongst sales and marketing and customer success and all of the collective teams that we talked about today, because we are all driving toward one revenue goal, and we can't do that without the other teams.
Valuable perspective. Collaboration is so key. I agree 100%. Well, that wraps up this episode of The Art of Marketing Operations. Thank you so much for joining us today, Xander.
Thank you. This was really, really good.
Oh, well, until next time, stay safe and take care.
Thank you for listening to The Art of Marketing Operations, brought to you by Taylor. Don't forget to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and share. Until next time.